Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Harry. I am not joined by Rafe today, and I am not doing a solo podcast as he did last week. Instead, I am here with Nick. He's the author, owner of the Instagram page Catholic Manhood. I'm very privileged to have you here, Nick, so thank you for joining in. But before we kind of get into Nick's story, I want to thank the listeners. Thanks for being here, keeping us a top 10% global podcast, as Rafe says. I'm sure he can go into those numbers one day. But thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Give us a review. If you have any questions or concerns or things you want to talk to the Buff about, leave us a review or send us an email at bufnagle at bufnagle.com, and we will return your message as soon as possible, and or when Rafe is out of Europe. But in the meantime, I'm here with Nick. And Nick, how are you tonight?
I'm well, Harry. How are you?
I'm doing great. Like I said, I'm happy you're here.
It's great to be here, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. So I just want to kind of give the listeners a little bit of background about you and kind of why I brought you on. And I keep telling my wife, I said, I'm really excited about this particular podcast because I've been telling my dad, like, hey, there's this guy on Instagram. He does all these Catholic manhood posts and about how to be a good man and how to be a good father and imitate Christ and all of these good things. And I send him, screenshots of your posts every once in a while, making sure that he's reading it. I make my wife read it. And she looks at me and is like, I don't understand this.
I don't get all this. Yeah.
But like I said, I'm excited that you're here. So I kind of want to just give you a chance to introduce yourself to the listeners and give us a little about yourself.
Absolutely. And again, Harry, thanks so much for having me on. I'm very happy to be on the podcast. My father always said I had a face for radio. So here I am, but yeah, so my name is Nick Sledge. I hail from Louisville, Kentucky, where bourbon, basketball, and horses mean just a little bit more. I am the founder of this little thing called Catholic Manhood, a little corner of Instagram, Substack, Twitter /X. But I create content for men specifically. I kind of started it for millennial men because I'm 31 myself, to, embrace Christ and to be a man through a Catholic lens, authentic masculinity. And I'll go into it a little bit more as to why I specifically made it that. But I've been doing it since 2019, just as a hobby. I really, really enjoy it, and I've been very blessed and fortunate that it's grown a lot since I've started back in 2019, and I'm happy to talk about that here on the air.
Yeah, it's I think I mentioned to you right before we started recording. Like, I've been following you for at least 2 years, is from what I can remember. And watched your numbers slowly tick up. And I think you're doing a great thing in that corner of the internet. And I think it's really important that you bring up authentic masculinity, which is something the world doesn't seem to have a grasp on exactly what that is. And instead, it just tends to berate men because the automatic assumption is that men are toxic and they need to be eradicated, and all men need to submit to some other earthly authority.
The people who say that, I will give fair warning that men that look to the virtue of authentic masculinity are toxic to people like that, which I'm happy to be in a way. But yes, authentic masculinity has been essentially not taken from us, but hidden from us, especially people around our age. Especially in a Catholicism in America, you see a lot of the feminine, which is still very important. But you you tend to have the masculinity a bit disguised. And it's important to shed light on that. And what the notion of masculinity is, especially here in America, it is important to distinguish that from actual Catholic masculinity and living a life through Christ, in Christ.
So what are some of those things that, there's a difference between authentic masculinity and Christian or Catholic masculinity? What do you see as those major differences?
Well, I would say, to start off, it is not rugged individualism. It is not, because it's easier to describe what it's not. It is not having a bunch of Ferraris in your driveway. It's not about that. It's not about having a bunch of women on your arm. It's not about selling material things. Ultimately, being an authentically Catholic man is to walk in the footsteps of Christ and to sacrifice for those that you love and to embrace virtue. And to simplify that as best I can.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think that's something that our generation, right? You mentioned your corner of the internet, a little Catholic manhood, is more geared towards the millennial generation, right? I'm 31 years old as well. And it's really hard to find those examples, especially in this world that doesn't allow those opportunities to be mainstream. And that's okay. We're not looking to be mainstream, right? We're looking to imitate Christ, which is technically not mainstream.
True. I want to love radically, and that's looked down upon, Yeah. So I completely agree. It is looked down upon to embrace the masculinity within Christ, but I think that comes from some kind of perverted view of what masculinity is. To be a gentleman is a good thing, but necessarily, in order to be a gentleman, first you must learn to be violent and know when to control it and how to control it. And I think that's very important to do both, to be tender. But we can talk, I know I'm conflating a lot of stuff right now, but in a nutshell, that is what really got me thinking about these things. I had nobody tell me about it. But yeah, and I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit later in the podcast, but I've seen that in the world, specifically, on social media, maybe in more modern parishes. You see a lack of that. And who's to tell you how to act as a man when you don't see any in church pews?
It's kind of hard to we're mimics, right? As humans, it's kind of hard to mimic that behavior when you never see it. And you're talking about you want to be a tender man while at the same time loving fiercely and being able to be violent. And there's a word for that we have in English, and most people don't know it. And the word is meekness.
Yes.
Right? And so a lot of people confuse meekness with weakness, simply because they rhyme. I'm not entirely sure why, right? But meekness is not meekness is not weakness. It's like you said, it is being able to be violent and to have the sword in the sheath at hand, but not needing to use it.
Or necessarily wanting to use it. Right. I don't ever want to get in a fight with somebody, but if it has to do with protecting my family, I simply have to.
Right. It is your duty.
Which is another thing that modern man doesn't have a conception of responsibility.
Yeah, that's hard. So, okay. So you were obviously not born in Louisville and then at age 26 decide automatically, time to start the Instagram page. So what is your background and growing up as far as those examples?
It all started in a log cabin many moons ago. So although I do know where Abraham Lincoln's birthplace is, but it's also in Kentucky somewhere. But So I grew up in still a good Christian family. My parents have always been, Christians. Um, I was raised that way. My grandfather on my dad's side, he was a preacher, a Baptist preacher, good man. Um, and I was raised knowing that Jesus Christ is Lord. I'm very thankful that I was raised that way. I ended up throughout the years after my grandpa had passed, we stopped going to church a little more and more. And there were times where, you had your up and downs. You would start going and you kind of fall off again. And then I got into high school and, kind of did our own thing. When I got into college, by this time I wasn't really going to church. And as we may know, anybody who is more on the traditional side and went to college as well, you kind of know academia is more or less, for the most part, against
Non-Catholic.
Christian. Yes, definitely non-Catholic. I will say that to be charitable. And I didn't necessarily bite on that. But at the time during college, I was, a professed atheist, or agnostic at least. I didn't really think about it. I was just trying to figure out, when my next paycheck was and when this class was over. I didn't care. And one day, I just got a little older and I was still in college and something clicked. I was in history class and they started talking about Socrates and Aristotle. And, you start reading Aristotle and you kind of almost seemingly randomly, start reading St. Thomas Aquinas and you figure out what's a saint? Why is this guy so smart? Why does he seem so holy? You get to the point where you can't justify that God's not real anymore. Long story short, by the time I was days before my 21st birthday, to fast forward a little bit, I got baptized in the Catholic Church, baptized and confirmed in the Catholic Church. Thank you, Father Ron Domhoff, at St. Peter the Apostle. I believe he's retired now. I remember a couple of years after that, I was serving at a Red Lobster and I served him. And I told him, I was like, you're the one who baptized me. He's like, oh, I did. And I was like, yeah, thanks be to God. Here's your fish. But I don't know if he remembered me, but
was it Friday or no?
Right. I think it was Friday night, but I'm very gracious that, I was blessed. The Lord opened my eyes and my heart, and I became Catholic days before my 21st birthday, which in a worldly view maybe wasn't the best time to become Catholic, but it was the right thing. So I've been a Catholic. I'm 31 now, so it's been about 11 over a decade since I've been Catholic, and I'm grateful for that. Now, the reason I started Catholic Manhood, I'm an IT guy by trade, by the way, and I sit in a coffee shop that I'm meeting with some of my coworkers, and during my free time, I would read, I would look online and stuff like that. And I was going to a parish, like just random parishes to try to find a home, and it all seemed kind of like just kind of rinky dinky. I don't know, like the felt banners, and it's very plain. And there, I only saw when I went to mass, I saw these little old ladies. Not that that's a bad thing. They're probably much holier
you probably
than
want
me.
to see other 22-year-old women, right? That's what you're really looking for.
Right at that time, yes, and anything like that, and you see it, and I'm like, well, and I kind of got to a point where are all the where all these knights at that I was reading about?
Right.
Like, did they all die off? What happened? What happened to I know people are kind of split on that view, like muscular Christianity, but I just used that in general for my thoughts at the time. I was like, I thought this was like the religion of the Crusades, where are all these valiant knights?
George?
Yes, exactly. Where's the dragon that needs to be slayed? Was it slayed that long ago and there are no more? So I couldn't really find a guy that was a priest, that wasn't a priest and was Catholic, that I could kind of look onto as like a mentor, which thank God there's Christ, Jesus, But I was like, well, I can't find one, so I'm going to make one. and
I'm going to be one.
Well, I wanted to be one, but I wanted to make this social media to where like I can what's the word? That I can make basically a collage of all of the things that make a man into an authentic Catholic man. And I wanted to concentrate it for someone to be able to consume and to be that ideal, which is why I have an anonymous image on my social media pages, because I am not that. And I hope one day to be a saint, but I hope to follow the saints that I actually post. And maybe the conglomeration of all of those will make somebody a saint one day. And that was my hope, and that was my goal, and it's been my goal since I started Catholic Manhood. So very blessed to have it kind of grow up, in a word, over the past 5 years.
Sure. Do you think you've been successful in that endeavor so far? or am I the only person that has ever reached out to you?
No, I have. So first of all, I am extremely humbled and I'm grateful that you have reached out to me. I'm very happy to be on these. I'm just some redneck from Kentucky that fell in love with Jesus and the Catholic Church.
That just by itself,
I don't deserve to be here, but by the grace of God, I am. So I thank you for that. And I have been on other podcasts. And I always get nervous too, because I enjoy writing. I'm always terrified of speaking. But I do think in ways it has been successful, not just because of the follower count. I think to measure that success would really be to measure God's success. My middle sister, she converted to the Catholic faith a couple of years ago on Easter. My mother is coming back to the Catholic faith very soon. My wife is also a convert. She converted right before we got married, but I did not force her to be. And I'm very happy that, she did that on her own, and God put that in her heart. My son is a cradle Catholic, and that I am most proud of. And if I measure the success of Catholic manhood by that, I would say it's been a huge hit.
I would almost argue that's just the success of Nick and not necessarily Catholic manhood, right? Because I would almost argue that you have created the persona to which you look up, right? Like you were looking up to this persona as well. And I would say that it gives you an example of something to strive for every single day. And not only the other tens of thousands of other individuals that see your content, but I had a cousin who joined seminary, I don't know, 6-ish years ago. I think he has since the seminarians and the priests there actually asked him to take some more life experience, so he stepped out for a little while.
Oh, really?
He did. But I think he's now dating a girl, because I saw them at the Eucharistic Congress together.
So he's discerned.
So he has now discerned, I think, out of seminary. But one of the things that he always told me was, he said, "Harry, I see you every single day, no matter where you are, carrying your rosary around." He said, "If I become a priest and I tell others to pray the rosary, it's because I saw you do it." And to me, that was just this overwhelming, joyful experience and joyful conversation. Right? If we are to bring others to Christ, we should do it through our examples and through our actions, so others can see Christ through us.
Absolutely.
And for me, I have never been more humbled than when he said that to me. And
absolutely. It's definitely a big compliment.
Oh, yeah,
absolutely. Especially a former seminarian doing that. It's I've to piggyback on that. I see a lot of. Now, I will say I have a rather traditional bent. I'm not an SSPXer for everyone on this call, I promise. But I do have a more traditional bent. As the things that I read in my prayer life. I've noticed people on social media, they fall into this trap of, well, I'm just going to debate everybody, tell you how wrong you are in Thomistic Aristotelian thought, and that's going to make me a better Catholic. And it doesn't. It just doesn't. I think you have to be very careful being prideful, and I really try to tailor my account into not getting into debate topics. Like, I'm just going to tell you what this saint said and you take it with how you want it. And I've had people comment on one of my posts. They're like, well, I really disagree with that. And I'm like, well, I didn't say it. Take it up with St. Ignatius of Loyola. I don't know why you disagree. You can disagree with them, I guess, but like, I would say history would be on their side instead of yours.
I would say that he's the saint so far.
Right. Maybe if you make it to that, maybe you can, disagree with him, but, things of that nature. But I really tried to make it aesthetically pleasing. I've tried to make it just pure Catholic content that makes you think, makes you look inside of yourself to change your inner self so you can, like you said, live by example. And I think Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I think that's his name. I think he was I want to say that he was a prisoner in World War II, ended up being, or something. There's books and stuff written about him, but I don't think he was Catholic per se. But I had just come across this quote, and it really makes sense. I'm sure a lot of people have said it, but he was like, you want to live like Christ so much that you make atheists question their belief in God, their disbelief in God, just by them, looking at you. Right. So purely by your example, and arguing with somebody until you're blue in the face is not going to achieve that. So I've really tried to stay away from those types of things, and I think it's Christian to do so.
I think that's charitable and humble, right? It's probably what you're going for. And I think I've noticed it too on some of your stuff where it's very, this is what the saint says, and this is an image of that saint. This is a depiction of their actions, and this is what is going on. And it's very easy to just say, well, St. George said this, and St. Aloysius of Gonzaga said this, and Augustine said that. And there's no berating and, I guess, persecution, right? Mm-hmm. It is just as bland. I'm not going to say bland. Maybe that's the wrong word for it, but straight.
Oh, I'm heartbroken. I gotta make my content better. No. I get what you mean. It's what it is. It is. So I have a very, now don't get me wrong here. The Old Man in the Sea. Hold on, let me check this real quick. So this Old Man in the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, very thin book. Mm-hmm. And obviously me and Ernest Hemingway probably wouldn't get along in real life if he and I were alive. I believe, he had some different views than me, but it doesn't take away that he was a great writer. Mm-hmm. And he was a masculine writer. And it's short and to the point, and it tells these profound stories. And that's how I wanted to make my content, and I still try to. So bland, in a way, is the correct word, but it's like quick and precise because that's how men think.
Have you, there's a running joke on this podcast about Midnight in Paris. Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen that movie?
I don't know who's in it.
Owen Wilson is the main character.
Probably. Wow. I'll ask my wife if it's have we watched Midnight in Paris?
It is a fantastic film, but Ernest Hemingway is depicted in the film, and he speaks exactly like how he writes. It's hilarious. Short to the point. Manly.
There was an old man in the sea.
That's right. All right. Well, I'm going to.
It resonated with you. You remembered it, didn't you?
That's right.
You remembered that part.
Absolutely. Well, it's reoccurring too, and Owen Wilson's character talks to him on a regular basis.
Oh, really? So yes. So the Ernest Hemingway's voice is a voice of reason in that movie.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go.
Yeah, it's worth it. Take the wife and ask her, when you're done here, have we seen Midnight in Paris? I'm
going to ask her that. That might be our next date night. Well,
it's a great date night movie.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Oop. That's a good thing.
So I'm going to transition here a little bit
Mm-hmm.
to going from Catholic manhood for millennials to Catholic dads for sons and for daughters, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we, as young fathers in our early 30s, both of us with young children, how do we imitate Christ on a regular daily basis such that our children can see it and grow closer to God?
One word. And I have learned it very quickly in some ways and very slowly in others. Sacrifice. It's just what Jesus did. You, you're gonna suffer, but you're gonna be happy about it. Which is what we all want to do in a way. But it is sacrifice, daily sacrifice, and dying to self. I think people want to, and again, I'm a new father. If I ask my father this question, he may have something different, but I bet he would say the same thing. Every day, I'll use my father, for example, since I'm a new one.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, my dad busted his butt and provided for us. And when they suffered and things that I found out later on in life, I didn't even see when I was a kid. And they raised me and they loved me. And they loved me. They sacrificed for me because they loved me. And that's what you do for people that you love. And that's what I try to do for my children and my wife. And I'm happy to. And I never thought I would be. So I think ultimately, in one word to boil it down, very Ernest Hemingway like sacrifice.
I would absolutely agree. And, you mentioned something there of dying to self. And I bring this up to my wife all the time. And I say, I really struggle. And you said, some ways it takes you longer than others. I say, I really struggle with sacrificing to myself because I love you and the kids so much. And I want to give you everything I have. But there's this part of me that just says, I want to go and do what I want to do. Where is the time for me? Where are my hobbies? When do I get my time?
Right.
And suddenly you think to yourself, well, that's not humble. That's not lifelike. That's not Christ-like. Why am I, trying to make it all about me? And I think it's really hard to learn sometimes as a father and a parent. But I think for me, having two kids and now having an almost 2-year-old and a 3.5-year-old is, in a way, it gets easier to sacrifice the more that you do it.
Mm-hmm. Become more selfless, probably.
Yeah, become more selfless. Yeah.
It definitely hits you, that's for sure. So what, I will say this, I do think one thing that you still have to make time for, obviously, is God. But just like Jesus, when he went on the mountain and prayed, went far away and prayed by himself, you still have to find time to do it. Doesn't matter if it's super early in the morning or when the kid's taking a nap. You still have to make time for God, which is a sacrifice of praise, And I think that just as much as sacrificing for your children, you need to be spiritually nourished. And you need to have discipline in your prayer life to continue to sacrifice. And that's what I have learned. If I don't make time for prayer, I falter in a lot of other things and become more selfish. Oh, I want to get that PlayStation 5 now. I want to play NCAA football 25. But although I'd like to, I keep thinking like, well, I should probably play with my son instead.
Right. Yeah. And that's one thing I've realized too. I used to do little card game tournaments on a weekly basis kind of thing. And now that's dwindled down to, once every 2 weeks. And even then it's like, you know what? Every once in a while, my daughter says,
then you start missing them.
You miss them every single time as soon as you leave the door.
And it has nothing to do. They're like, all right, bye, Dad. We'll see you later. And they're playing. They don't even care. And you leave. You're like, I'm really missing something, Right. But you go anyway, of course. But you have that little thought in the back of your head, like more and more, I would suppose, right?
That's exactly it. More and more. And all I want to do is spend time with them. And then they're asleep. and I can't spend time with them when
Right.
they're
We
asleep.
get home from work, get a few hours. Good night, Dad. But those are some of the precious moments, that's for sure. But yeah, sorry to get all what's the word? Teary-eyed on this stuff. But you're absolutely right. I agree. I love my kids and my wife, man. I really do. I'd do anything for them.
Yeah, and you have to make the time for them, and kind of like you said, you have to make time for yourself spiritually, and I would even argue, and my wife would argue, physically,
Yes.
because you need to be able to protect and provide and to take care of them. Because if you're not in that position to do so, well, then you're worthless.
Then who else is going to?
Right.
I mean, hopefully, please God, don't let something happen. But who else? Like, you are charged to do that. It's your duty. You have promised to take care of your wife in sickness and in health, whatever that may be, and that includes your children. And obviously, of course, being authentically Catholic man, you have to. I would say, in my experience, and I think really kind of in the church's overall advice, put your marriage first, then your kids, because it flows down. So to leave it as simple as I can, my thoughts on it are sacrifice for your family. You have to love radically, and to love radically is to sacrifice. Make time for prayer with God. Go to mass as often as you can, and definitely every Sunday and feast day. Go home and love your family, your wife first, kids second. It doesn't mean they mean less than you. That just means like there is a hierarchy, just like in the church, and there's a hierarchy in the family. And I have lived by that, and it is bared or bore. I don't know which one. I think it's bared fruit.
Mm-hmm. No, I'd agree. And it's funny that you mentioned that you have to like love radically, especially in that order. I actually wanted to bring up a quote that my dad sent me this morning. So he's listening in on this at 5 a.m. in France, wherever he is. Hey, Dad.
Awesome. Well, it depends. Is he at the Olympics?
Well, no, he's not. He's in architecture school.
Wow.
So the listeners of the podcast know that he's on a 8-week architecture summer school.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it's very, he loves it.
Beauty matters.
Yes. And I kind of wanted to bring that up and have your opinions on it too. We can do the quote here in a second. We can talk about architecture and beauty. But we brought up, and I think he's brought up before that, or at least we brought it up in a phone call. All of our conversations get blurred together. Not entirely sure which is which. Beauty in buildings and in architecture should reflect what it contains inside. Right? So that's a reason. There is a reason, especially in Europe, why cathedrals are big and beautiful and ornate, and why government capitol buildings and administration buildings are as big as they are. They should be beautiful, right? Because they represent the whole. And as you kind of have this hierarchy coming on down, your maybe your small little markets or your pottery stand or whatever, or your fruit stand is less ornate. It doesn't mean that it's not worth any less. It's just that what it contains inside is not as grandiose and important. And there's a reason why your churches should be the most grandiose.
Absolutely. I think that our ancestors built different because they believed different. They believed in the real presence, and that's why they put so much detail in all of their work. And I'll tell you this, the detail isn't for you and me, although we benefit from its great beauty. The detail glorifies God. So like that, the farthest up corner to the left in the Cathedral of Notre Dame is not for you, it's for God. And we benefit from it. It is the architecture around you is supposed to Hey, man, I'd like to talk to that guy. It's good in architecture school too. Big fan of architecture. I would love to have gone to architecture school if I had to do it all over again. But it's supposed to, when you walk around, it's supposed to inspire you.
Yes.
And inspire to look up. And I would say good architecture is like music in place. And music is like architecture of sound. If you can see these sound bars here.
Yep.
I find it very interesting, but like there's a huge, like, beauty matters, details matters. And the reason beauty and details matter is because, because truth matters, beauty and details matter. Because there is objective truth and there is objective beauty. And I think that's extremely important in this world to understand, because the whole world's telling you that beauty is subjective. And I think that is vastly and terribly wrong.
Have you spent any time in Eastern Europe?
Oh, I wish. I've been to divine liturgies, but I'm not very well traveled. My wife is. I've been up and down the United States, but I've never been out of the country other than Mexico for my honeymoon. But I want to one day. How about you? I know you were in the military. So
I spent a little bit of time a couple of years ago in Albania and Kosovo and Macedonia.
Really?
And the capital, Macedonia, Skopje, is very interesting because they have some very ornate churches and dedications.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it because they claim Mother Teresa as her home in Macedonia.
I didn't know she was Macedonian.
She's not.
Okay.
She might be a lot of.
She used to be a beauty queen. I know that.
Yeah, a lot of the Balkans claim Mother Teresa in one manner or another, but in the capital, like across the river from each other, is old Soviet brutalism. Just concrete buildings, blocks, square edges, nothing
Kills
beautiful
your soul,
about it.
doesn't
It does. And then right across the street are beautiful statues and structures and monuments and pillars and all of these other good things about architecture. I'm sure my dad can relate to now that he's seen it and started to design some of it. But it really, one of them inspires you. And one of them, like you said, just kills your soul.
Yep. And that's on purpose. Both of them. Because one of them hated God, and you see where ugliness comes from. It comes from hate and disbelief, or just plain hate of the divine. So you make everything worldly and ugly. And I hate living in that part. You know, I'm happy I live in places where we have beautiful buildings. Not nearly enough sometimes, but in my mind, you can make it that way. But I completely agree. Architecture, beauty, paintings, icons, they're all extremely important. Not as important as Christ, but like it conveys the divine. Mm-hmm. And that is important to see on earth because it feeds your soul.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I don't have anything else major for you here, Nick. Kind of wrap up a little bit. I know you kind of summarized it earlier as far as what we should do as men to raise our sons and daughters. But if you have anything for listeners in general to help them seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, what do you say?
There is a crusade against purity and manliness. I'm not going to totally quote St. Jose Maria Escriva, but that crusade is a matter for you. If you are a man listening to this podcast, if you're a Catholic man, a Christian man listening to this podcast, get up, do what you're supposed to do as far as responsibility and your duties to your family and to God. Pray the rosary, say the Jesus prayer, and walk in Christ's footsteps and become a saint. You need to be the creed. You were born for so much more than to look to things of the world for happiness. You were born to be a saint, and it's time to go be one.
I love it. Absolutely love it. And everything that Nick says, everything that we always say here on the podcast: seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish. And as Catholic Manhood says, be the creed. Enjoy the adventure of life.
Hey, thank you so much, Harry.
Take care. It's going to be a great day.